This is the brand new 28-200 lens from Lumix. It's a pretty powerful little guy. I've personally never owned kind of a Powerzoom lens like this, but it is so versatile and honestly, a lot of fun to use. So in today's video, I'm going to take you guys along for a project that I'm working on, and I'm going to use this lens for all the video work. It's a job I'm doing for Turo. It's not sponsored by Turo, but I'm creating some content, some vertical reels for them. I had a ton of fun using this lens both for photos and for videos. So we're going to talk about the pros, some of the cons of this lens as well, and then you guys can let me know in the comments what you guys think of a Powerzoom type lens like this. As an automotive photographer, the focal lengths of 28-200 kind of covers like a massive range of what most of us enjoy using. When you're shooting automotive, you tend to not want to go actually too much lower than 28, unless you're shooting interiors or maybe you like that wider field of view. But for me personally, the 28-200 covers a vast range and can allow us to get very creative. Some of my favorite focal lengths to use are the 35mm and the 85mm, and that's covered in here. It covers 50mm, but it also covers up to 200. So that's a pretty incredible focal range if you ask me, being able to get the compression of 200 as well as the wide angle of view with the 28. When you're shooting at 28mm, this lens actually has a 2:1 ratio for macro, which essentially means you can get very close and get some incredible details with this lens. Possibly one thing this lens falls short on, it'd be tough to use as a vlogging lens. This is about as wide as you can get on the full frame. So I mean, if you like this kind of focal length, then it's not bad, but I'd probably prefer something like a 20mm, something like that would be a better focal length for vlogging. The aperture of this lens at 28 is an aperture of 4. And when you're fully zoomed to 200, your aperture can be only 7.1. So yes, it is a variable aperture lens, and to some people, this might be a game stopper, but when I was using this practically, it really doesn't have that much effect. A lot of people are worried about getting enough depth of field, but as you get farther out in the range up to 200, you're adding so much compression that you're still getting a ton of separation between your subject and the background. Now, where I could speak to this maybe being a negative is that you have to possibly use ISO or start to crank up your ISO if you're in low light situations or if you're shooting inside. If you're using something like an APS-C camera or like a crop sensor camera, for example, you really don't want to push your ISO. But with these Lumix cameras, the technology in them for handling ISO is fantastic. And when you're shooting video with the Lumix cameras, you have a dual native ISO of 4000 on the S5 II and the S5 IIX, which are my main camera bodies. And so when you're shooting in lower light situations, you can just put your dual native ISO to that 4000 mark, and then you're not so worried about the low light capabilities. I would say this is probably like the biggest downfall to this lens, is you would want a maybe aperture of 4 throughout the focal range. But again, in practical usability, I didn't notice it to be an issue. Now in my scenario, I was shooting in bright, sunny daylight, so this was not an issue for me at all. But again, if you're shooting in lower light conditions, you don't have a camera with dual native ISO, or something that doesn't handle ISO well, like the Lumix cameras handle it phenomenally, then maybe it's not a lens for you. One other interesting thing that I actually didn't even know about this lens until I got on a call with Lumix was that your camera can go up to usually an f-stop of like 22. But when this lens is at 28, you can scroll the f-stop up to 32, f32, which means you can shoot in crazy bright situations. But when you actually zoom all the way up to 200, this lens can go up to an f-stop of 45, which is kind of mind-blowing. I don't know what situation I would use that in, but there might be some that you would use that in. But it's still crazy impressive how capable this lens is. So when we talk about capable, let's also talk about the quality. This lens is sharp from corner to corner. It is absolutely gorgeous compared to its competitors like in the Tamarons or the Sonys. I've seen some comparative images, and this thing performs at an incredibly high level at an incredibly good price. The optical quality is absolutely fantastic, and I don't think you're going to have any issues with the quality of this lens. Additionally, this is the smallest lens of its type across the board. So if you're looking for a lens that can be your all-rounder, do everything, just put one lens on your camera and travel the world with it, this could be a really, really good option. And that fully aligns with everything that Lumix is doing. They are being super intentional with the quality, especially in the video. You actually get very, very minimal focus breathing as you kind of go through the zoom range, which is an impressive feat for the engineers to be able to get that into this type of lens. So I'm a huge fan of these lenses and how they pair with one another. For example, this is their brand new 100mm lens as well. This is a macro. Look at the size comparison. Look at how tiny these lenses are. These are so incredibly small. They all have the same diameter. They all have a 67mm thread size. So to be able to get a 28-200 to fit the same size as this 85 or this 18mm or the 35 that's on this camera right now, incredible engineering. I'm super, super stoked on it because as a videographer, when you want to put these on a gimbal, for example, all those other prime lenses are the exact same size and weight. So you can throw the same filter on the lens, balance it on the gimbal. But what about this one? Well, if you zoom this into around 70 to 75 and you balance this on your gimbal will then be perfectly balanced. More or less, most gimbals will be able to balance this throughout the range at 28 and at 200 well on a gimbal, and it'll stay balanced well enough. So test that out for yourself, but it's actually really cool being able to put this on a gimbal, balance it in the mid-range, and then you should be good to go for your whole shoot. Additionally, if you're not using a gimbal, all the video that I shot with this was shot handheld with my Lumix and this camera because it has in-body image stabilization and optical image stabilization on the lens here, so you can just flick that on and this becomes a super steady lens, which is super handy if you are zooming out all the way to the 200mm. Then you're going to get a lot of shake, but between the in-body image stabilization in the Lumix and the optical image stabilization in this lens, you can do some incredible stuff. You can make it look like it's on a tripod essentially, especially if you're zoomed out all the way to these mountains. So what was it like to use? If I'm being honest, I was skeptical of this lens and whether or not I would enjoy the variable aperture. But truth be told, there's ways around it. You can work around maybe setting your ISO to auto so it can compensate as you zoom throughout the range. Your ISO can compensate naturally with technology being better and smarter than I am, and it worked really well. Again, I was shooting in a really bright scenario, so I didn't have to worry about the ISO going too high or too low. I was able to compensate. But one thing I enjoyed was being able to stand in one position and literally just move this frame to any millimeter length that I wanted, that I could get the vision in my head. I'm typically a prime lens user, so I have to actually use my feet to get the frame that I want. So this was actually a lot of fun to use. I didn't really feel any of the limitations from the aperture. I wasn't wishing that I had more depth of field from the lens, for example. I don't know if I personally, my personal shoot style, I don't know if I could use this as my only lens because I love shooting with primes with low apertures. But if you're someone that's looking for one lens, a one do-it-all lens, this is an awesome place to start because you actually get to know where maybe you would sit naturally or more often in this focal range. And then as you start to develop your lenses, you can start to purchase lenses based on what you use most often. So if you find you're always zooming into 50 because you like that focal length, then eventually you can go and get a 50mm prime with a better aperture. Or if you like zooming out a bunch, you can maybe get a 70-200 or the 100mm so you can zoom a little farther and have a lower aperture. And the more you get into the compression zone, you tend to want to open up the aperture to something higher anyways to be able to get more depth in the image. So as a user, I love this lens. I actually will keep this with me. I will travel with this, and it helps me a ton because I actually don't have any of those farther zoom lenses, and I think this is going to cover obviously the range from 100 through 200 that I don't have in my primes range. I'm thrilled with this lens and I think it's well worth you guys checking out. The price point is fantastic. I'll put it up on the screen here. For the price, I think it's worth you guys taking a deeper look at. I enjoyed shooting photos with it and I enjoyed shooting video with it. It fits super well with my ecosystem already since I'm in the Lumix ecosystem. Honestly, let me know what your favorite focal length is. Is it in this range? And would you consider getting a super zoom kind of lens like this? Heading out with the EV Cadillac Lyriq was a really good time. I would say I'm not really much of an EV guy, but I am a tech guy, and there was so much tech in this car, it was unbelievable. There was a 33-inch screen in front of you. It had Super Cruise, so it could drive itself. This car is technically self-driving. No hands. One hand on the camera, the other one's right here. This green light means it should be driving itself. But I'll tell you, these things are like terrifying. Do you guys trust self-driving vehicles? It had speakers in the headrest. The sound system was honestly fantastic. It had heated, cooled seats, and they were massaging me while I was driving. It was an awesome experience. I don't know if I'd ever buy one of these vehicles, but it was great to get to test one out while I shot for Turo. This video isn't sponsored by Turo by any means, but as an automotive content creator, I've actually leaned on Turo a ton to get vehicles that are more exciting to shoot than my Golf, or if I need something for a specific project or I'm traveling somewhere, I use Turo personally all the time. So I'm thrilled to be able to actually work with them and be able to create content for them. So if you guys haven't checked out Turo as an asset, as an automotive content creator to be able to get higher end vehicles that you might not be able to get access to, it's a great tool and service for you guys. I hope you guys enjoyed a bit of the behind the scenes on this video. If you guys enjoyed the way that the photos and videos were edited, I have some presets on my website for you guys. You can go check out, use the discount code here to get 30% off. If you guys enjoy automotive content creation, that's what we do here, and I love bringing you guys along for the journey and teaching you everything that I know along the way. Consider subscribing to the channel here, or you might like that video there. But I do hope that I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.